All right, so now on to step number 2 within this Project 3 discussion. We're going to record ourselves doing some formatting of this little worksheet, this little list, as we record it through the Excel macro recorder tool. So first, let me start recording here. I'm going to go back up to my View tab, back into Macros, and I'm going to record a new macro. Now this one I'm just going to call it Format List. Okay? No shortcut key again. We're going to store it inside of this workbook, and I'll give it a description. We'll say formats the headers and the currency columns. All right, so I'm going to hit OK, and once again I am now recording. So I'm going to run a series of steps here. I'm going to format row number 1 there, all the headers, and I'm going to format the C, D, E, and F columns. These are dollar amounts. I want these to look like currency. So first my headers. I'll go ahead and select A1 through F1, and I'm going to hop up to my Home tab, and I'm just going to do some stuff here just to format them, make them more presentable, get them to stand out. So I'm going to make this bold. What else should I do here? I'll change the background color. Let's go for blue. I'm going to change the font, blue and black, perhaps not as much contrast. I'll make them white. They kind of pop out of there. And I want to add a bottom border. Let's just put a bottom thick border here. All right, there's my headers, nice and formatted. But now I want to grab all of these dollar amounts. Now I want you to think about this for a moment. Remember, we are now recording. So anything I do, it is recording it. I just clicked in the cell C2. Excel just wrote that down. It said, hey, you just clicked in C2. Now, here's a potential issue. This macro that I'm creating right now, doing some simple formatting, is perhaps going to be applied to multiple different lists. Like in our scenario, remember east, west, north, and south? 4 different worksheets. And each worksheet probably has a different amount of records. One worksheet might have 5 records. Another worksheet might have 100 records. Well, the issue is, I'm recording right now. And if I tell it, oh, get from C2 to F, whatever that is, F20, well, every time I record, or every time I run this macro, it's always going to do C2 to F20. That's not what I want. I need it to be dynamic. I want it to pick up on whether I have 5 records, or 100,000 records, or somewhere in between. It needs to be dynamic enough to figure that out. So here's a way that we can do this using the macro recorder. So remember, I clicked in the cell C2. I've essentially told Excel through the macro recorder that, hey, my data starts inside of cell C2. But here's the dynamic way of telling it where my data ends. So I'm going to use a shortcut key on my keyboard. I'm going to press Control, Shift, and my down arrow. So this will select all the way down until it finds an empty cell, essentially the end of my data. So I didn't tell it, hey, go from C2 to C whatever, but I just said, find the end of it. Find that empty cell and then stop. Now I need to go to the right. So once again, Control Shift, right arrow. And now I've grabbed that chunk of data dynamically. Control Shift and your arrow keys. This looks for empty cells. As soon as it finds it, it stops. It's not looking for a specific endpoint. It's just looking for that last empty value and then stops. A dynamic range of data now. So now I'm going to format it. Back to my Home tab. Over under number, I'll turn this into a currency value. And now I've formatted all my data there. Easy. I formatted the headers. I formatted my data. I'm done recording. So back to my View tab. Back into macros, and I'll stop recording. Very important step. Always make sure that you stop recording your macros. All right, so we've completed the first 2 steps using the macro recorder. We put the headers in there. That was 1. We formatted the headers, and we formatted the currency values. That was step number 2. So now we're going to move into step number 3. We're going to get away from the macro recorder, put that away for a little while, and we're going to get into the Visual Basic Code. And we're going to start to write our own code to get this to not just apply to one worksheet, but to all 4 worksheets inside of our workbook, or however many worksheets you have. So follow along with me. Let's jump into the next step.